There's nothing better than football on film. Television, the movies, anything with football is great to see it in action pictures. Well, we have a story today from footballarchaeology.com's Timothy P. Brown where you could take your own home movies into Bell and Howell movies. Coming up in just a second, Tim's going to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another evening with a visit from Timothy P. Brown of footballarchaeology.com. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren, we're gonna get real during this podcast.
You're gonna get real fast, right?
Yes.
Of course, Tim is segueing into a recent tidbit that he had called 1950s Bell and Howell Tips on Football Home Movies. That's quite a title there, Tim. What can you tell us about it?
Well, first of all, for all the young people who listen, a reel is the actual movie, the little contraption, the round thing that the movie film wraps around. So that's what a reel is. And that's where the joke, kind of comes from. So anyways, so this, we talked last week about, some of my tidbits just come from, I stumble across something when researching another. But others that I've actually been doing a fair amount of them lately is things that I find I come across on eBay or some other site. And, I buy them thinking, I think I can make a story out of this, but I'm never sure because, I don't, a lot of times, it's like this one is about a 1951 Bell and Howell home movie camera brochure that basically provided helpful hints on how to film football using your home movie camera, right? And it's actually a really cool brochure. But it's one of those things like you don't even think about anymore, right? But at the time, home movies were still fairly new. And, motion pictures, to go to the local theater, that started in, say, the 20s, right? So anyways, movie technology advanced and, by the late 40s, early 50s, you could buy a movie camera and, take your own movies. And so one of the things that I really enjoyed about this was just in reading this brochure, so it's 16-page brochure, then I found a couple of other like newspaper articles. And then, there were magazines at the time devoted to, home movie hobbyists. But one of the things that I just hadn't thought about was that back then, people who took home movies oftentimes would edit these movies and put together, it was like they were doing a travel log or a newsreel, right? And so it's not all that different from what people do on TikTok or something today. They're gonna film a bunch of stuff and put together a story of whatever they're telling a story about. But back then, you were doing it with movie film, right? So, and like, back in my early days, I was a graduate assistant at a football program. One of my duties was to splice together like every, films of every time we ran this play in the year. I, cut the film apart and spliced it all together so that they could watch if you wanted to look at this play, every time we ran that play, boom, it was available. So I know how that splicing process worked. And to just educate the listener or viewer, basically when you needed this little contraption that it kind of was similar to a stapler or something, but you'd cut the film on either side and it would leave it was like a jigsaw puzzle piece, where there was like the kind of the male side and the female side and, and then you had this special tape that you'd then put around it to keep the thing together. Anyways, so these home hobbyists were doing the same thing. And so a lot of this brochure describes how to focus properly. And, back then, if you wanted to focus, you were doing it the old fashioned way. There were no buttons there was no autofocus. There was no little button that zoomed in and out. You focused by turning the dial, right? Or more often you had to swap the lens, right? If you were doing a close up, you had one lens, but if you're doing something across the field, you had to swap the lens. And so some of the cameras had a little pivoting, like a turnstile kind of thing, where you could swap among the three lenses. So, anyways, um, so it provided advice about like taking pictures of the scoreboard to show how the game was progressing, pennants, show pictures of the crowd and concession stands, whatever. So it's just kind of funny that and at the time, depending on the camera that you had, you either got like 2 minutes of film or 4 minutes of film. So like now, it's sitting there with your camera, it's just like you can film forever, right? But so they were more constrained, before they had to swap out the film. So anyways, just crazy stuff like that. And yet, so the other side of it. So, number one, it's just kind of funny that there were hobbyists who were all into editing these films. But the other thing that's actually disappointing is, in the tidbit, I compared it to the RPPC's real photo postcards. And so if you have a photograph or an RPPC that grandma or great grandma or great great grandma stuck in a photo album, if somebody finds that photo album in the attic and they pull it out, they need no other technology to look at that picture. There it is. You can see this picture, and it's either a cool picture, it's ugly, it's overexposed, whatever. There it is. Whereas if you find Great Uncle Joe's uh, film from his high school days from 1951 or 52, number one, the film may have disintegrated by now. But if it's still in decent shape, in order to view it, you need a movie camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm guessing a lot of people have found films in the attic and tossed them away, you know. And I know you can send them into places and they'll run them and give you used to be a videotape, but now whatever, some kind of electronic, version of the same movie. But and here and there, I did some searching. There's a couple of places like universities that have like home movie collections, and they digitize home movies. But I'm guessing most of them have just been tossed. Just like the old, uh, my great aunt and grandma used to go on these trips all over the place, and they'd come back and show us their slideshow of, the time they went to Norway or wherever, wherever it was. And, a lot of that stuff just got tossed, because people don't have, they just didn't have the technology uh, to view them properly. Right. And even more so, a slideshow is one thing, but a movie camera, to get a, 8 millimeter or 16 millimeter movie camera from the 1950s, not
Right.
easy, you know.
I'm going to do my public service
Okay.
work here. Now, you mentioned that you could send them in. I guess it was like the year before COVID hit. There was some people here local in town. I don't know if they still do it, but they had a place where you would just take it to their house. Because my family, we had a bunch of slides, a bunch of movies, 8 millimeter movies from 50s, 60s, early 70s. And so I took them in because I'm sort of the family archivist, but my dad's like, oh, you know what? We can never watch these things. So one year for Christmas, I stole them all out of his house, and he was kind of pissed because he, figured it out like a week after that. He's like going, hey, where the hell's all those tapes at? I said, don't worry about it. And so he was on to me a little bit, but I got all of them digitized and we put them on, jump drives, and I burned some in a DVD so he could watch because he would never figure out a jump drive. And so we watched them, and it's the greatest thing that you can sit there and watch I'm watching my grandparents when they're young people, and I'm watching myself as a baby and my dad as a kid. And it's really neat to have
Yeah.
that, and you have it forever now. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and I know there's services, you know, you can send them off to and they do them wherever they do them in the world. But uh, I'm just guessing a lot of people don't do what you did. So good for you that you
Yeah,
did. So
I
do
was
you have
nervous
any
about.
do you have any of your high school football films?
No, I didn't play football in high school.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay.
No, no, I was a little bit too small to do it. You know, I graduated with a guy named Mark Stepnoski, who ended up being the center for the Cowboys in the 90s, you know, Troy Aikman center. And you know, he started as a freshman. I was 130 pounds. I would have got killed in that. So I played soccer, but
Okay.
I
The other
played
football.
I played when I was a little younger. I played middle school football, but yeah, I didn't. I regret that. I wish I would have, but I did not. But how about
Yeah.
you?
Well,
You have your high school
no,
football films?
no.
No.
And you
Okay.
know, I kind of in the that's one of the things I said in the tidbit was just like, I mean, we would watch the film. We had game film and we'd watch it, each week. But then whatever happened to all that stuff, I have no idea. But I don't have it. And by VCRs and camcorders weren't on the market yet. When I was uh, in my ute. So whereas my younger brothers, they've got some of that stuff. But yeah, it's just kind of where you were, age wise.
Now, yeah, now they have it. Well, at least they did when I stopped officiating in 2016. It went from videotapes because we'd always want game film to see, you know, if how we were positioned and things like that. It was educational for officiating. And they had this site that everybody was joining called Huddle,
Yeah,
HUDL.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
And they had everybody's game film on it. You could watch, you know, game from Arkansas if you wanted to, if you're a member of it. But it was kind of neat. So I think now they're preserved a lot better, and you know,
Yeah,
people in 50 years from now they'll be able to watch all kinds of stuff from the early 2000s.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, for me, like I'm a big fan of RPPCs, so I'm glad that those were preserved, right? I
Hmm.
don't think I have ever seen a home movie of somebody playing football. So, maybe there weren't that many of them, but I'm getting, if I'm a dad in 1952 and I got a home movie camera, I'm probably filming my kid. But, I've never seen any pop up, you know.
Yeah, I was doing some research. I was doing the Rose Bowl series we did a couple years ago that you helped me on. And I was trying to find some footage of the Rose Bowl, and there was a home movie, public domain on Wikimedia Commons. And so I'm going there, I'm like, oh, this is Rose Bowl coverage. But they're showing the parade, they're showing like this some of the stadium like before the game.
Yeah,
There's no game film. They're showing people in the stands. Nothing on the no game film at all, but
yeah,
it was still kind of neat to watch, you know, some of the pageantry of the Rose Bowl
yeah.
in whatever 1952 or whatever it was. That's kind of cool. But
Well, like I mentioned in the tidbit too, like the Zapruder film of Kennedy being assassinated, that was on a Bell and Howell camera, you know,
oh,
and he's
okay.
just a home movie hobbyist who happened to be filming as the president, drove by. So now that's obviously been preserved, but
Right. Yeah, been maybe overly preserved
yeah,
that film.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So, anyways, I mean, it's just you
yeah,
know, the home movie hobbyists at the time were probably something on the. They probably had to have a little bit of money, and they were some kind of early adopter geek, right? Because they
right.
were dealing with a new a relatively new consumer technology. So they probably had a cool TV set at home too. They were probably into that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I know my dad got into it when he was in the service because he said there was so much downtime and they had all kinds of extra money and they were, you know, he was in Okinawa, so there's all kinds of great Japanese technology over there. That's what he started doing. He bought cameras and stuff and filmed guys on base, you know, throwing a frisbee or whatever, and just started goofing around with it. So I guess probably a lot of servicemen probably did that to fill in some of
yeah,
the time voids they had.
yeah,
Um,
cameras and watches.
Yeah,
Most servicemen ended up with one or the other.
right. Right. Well, Tim, this is another instance where you come up with some great stories and share some great history and preserve it surrounding the game of football, but not maybe directly into the
Yeah.
game of football, maybe some pop culture mixed in. And you do this a lot with your tidbits. And maybe you could share with the listeners where they can partake in some of your tidbits.
Yeah. Footballarchaeology.com is my site. It's our site blog newsletter. It's on Substack. So go there, subscribe. And, if you'd rather, you can just find the site, bookmark it, and go there, kind of whenever you're interested. And then I'm also on Blue Sky. And so, every time that I post something new, you can find it on Blue Sky. But if you subscribe, you just get an email in your inbox each time I subscribe. So that's kind of the easiest thing if that's what you want.
All right, Tim. Well, we definitely appreciate you doing this and preserving the history, and we enjoy having you on here each Tuesday. And we'd love to talk to you again next Tuesday about some more great football history.
Very good. Look forward to it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.